Marcia, Connie, and Teresa.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome all students, alumni, and guests. Thank you for taking the time to join today's CUHK Faculty of Law 6th Female Legal Leaders Seminar. I'm Queenie Lai, Associate Dean of Teaching and Learning, organizer and moderator for today's seminar. Today, we have over 300 registrants, including law students, alumni, legal practitioners, and academics, which is one of the highest number of registrants ever for this seminar series. So this high number of registrants shows that we are all very eager to learn from today's three remarkable female legal leaders. So thank you everyone for taking the time to join us, for your support for this seminar, particularly male participants. Gender inclusivity necessitates the efforts of every member of the community. It is not only a women's issue. So thank you, male allies. We need your support for diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Before I introduce our three distinguished guests, may I briefly introduce the background of CUHK Law Female Legal Leaders Seminar. Now in our 6th year, the series started in 2019 and has chronicled huge success. May I take this opportunity to thank Dean Lutz Christian Wolf, who is with us today, for his vision and leadership for coming up with the original idea of Female Legal Leaders series in 2019, creating a much needed forum to celebrate women leaders of the Hong Kong legal industry. The forum with great feedback, and it's much appreciated by the Hong Kong legal community. It is an opportunity for our law students, alumni, lawyers, and aspiring lawyers to meet some of the brilliant minds and female role models at the forefront of the Hong Kong legal community, and a chance for all of us to discuss ways to enhance diversity and equal opportunity in the legal industry. Role models matter, particularly for women. Role models represent and expand what is possible and inspire women to be more ambitious and aim higher. The ripple effect of visible female role models impact not just our beliefs about women's ability to hold senior management positions, but what we project for women in the future. On behalf of CUHK Law, may I now warmly welcome and introduce our three distinguished guests. Very grateful to have them with us today. Ms. Marcia Ellis, Ms. Connie Heng, and Ms. Teresa Ko. I'll introduce three speakers' background. Our first speaker, Ms. Marcia Ellis, Global Co-Chair of Morrison Foerster Private Equity Practice. Marcia is a member of the firm's Global Board of Directors and Global Environmental, Social, and Governance Steering Committee. She's also elected as the co-chair of the American Chamber of Commerce Hong Kong's Women of Influence Committee. And I understand they have, you just had a very wonderful celebration over this past weekend for International Women's Day and the Women of Influence Award. So congratulations, Marcia, for that. Having practiced in Asia for more than a quarter of a century, Marcia is one of the most experienced private equity lawyers active in the Asian market. In the past 3 years, she has advised clients on deals with a total aggregate value well in excess of US 265 billion. Thank you, Marcia. Our second speaker, Ms. Connie Heng, Asia Pacific Regional Managing Partner, Clifford Chance. During Connie's 20+ year career, she has assisted many Hong Kong and Chinese issuers with their securities offerings in the international debt capital markets and advised on numerous landmark transactions. She's recognized as a leading individual by Chambers Asia Pacific and Legal 500 and has received a highly regarded ranking from IFRS 1000. Connie is a member of the firm's Global Executive Leadership Group and has represented the firm as part of its delegation to the World Economic Forum in Davos. Connie is an active supporter of diversity and gender issues and founded the region's first women's network. Thank you so much, Connie, for joining us today. And last but not least, we are honored to have Ms. Teresa Ko, Senior Partner, Hong Kong and China Chairman, Founding Partner of Capital Market Practice in Asia, Freshfields, and Chair of IFRS Foundation, International Financial Reporting Standards Foundation. Teresa, described as an icon in the industry, is one of the most prominent corporate and securities lawyers in Hong Kong. She's the founding partner of Freshfields Asia Equity Capital Markets Practice and has helped numerous Chinese state-owned, privately owned, and international companies list on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, including advising 8 out of 10 largest IPOs in Hong Kong. Among her many public service appointments, Teresa currently serves as Vice Chair of the IFRS Foundation Trustees and as Chair of the Due Process Oversight Committee. She was the first female to chair the Hong Kong Stock Exchange Listing Committee, and she currently serves as co-chair of the Hong Kong Stock Exchange Listing Review Committee and deputy chair of the SFC Takeovers and Mergers Panel. Amongst her many accolades, Teresa was recognized as a Heroes Executive Role Model in 2023 for the 6th consecutive year and ranked 5th place in 2023's list of 100 role models. She was also named in IFRS 1000 Women Leaders 2022, an elite ranking for the most prominent women lawyers globally, and also in Forbes Asia Power Business Women list in 2021. Thank you, Teresa, for joining us. On behalf of CUHK Faculty of Law, we are humbled and truly honored by all three speakers' support and presence with us today. So following all three speakers sharing, we will have a dedicated question and answer session. May I encourage all participants to take advantage of today's wonderful opportunity to interact with three leading lawyers in the Hong Kong industry. So please submit your questions to me via Zoom private chat anytime during the seminar. This is a very valuable opportunity, so I will read out your questions to our speakers at the end of the Q&A session. Now, may I welcome Ms. Marcia Ellis, our first speaker, Global Co-Chair, Private Equity, Morrison Foerster. Thanks, Marcia.
Thanks very much, Queenie, and thanks a lot to CUHK Law for asking me to speak today. I'm truly honored to be on this virtual stage with Connie and Teresa. And I want to make this part relatively short because I do think the most interesting part here could be the question and answers. But I wanted to talk a bit about how I became a lawyer and my experience as a lawyer, both as a woman and as a mother, and as just the person I am. So I did not go to law school until I was, I guess, 30 years old. I spent a lot of time before law school teaching in nowhere, China, a place that you probably haven't even heard of and had one stoplight. I taught in Japan. I taught, and then I went to Taiwan and was at National Taiwan University doing a master's degree in anthropology. And it was only when that anthropology degree started leading me to look at the law because of the thesis I was writing that I started to think, oh, maybe I should go back to the United States and go to law school. So I went to Columbia, went to law school, and I intended to, after graduating from law school, I intended to only practice in private practice long enough to pay off my law school loans. But life has a way of changing things for us, and life did, in fact, change things for me. And it became clear that I was going to have to be the main breadwinner in my family for a long time to come. So I decided that I would stay in practice. I was helped by that early on in my practice, I had really wonderful women mentors. So like many people in the US, at the year after I graduated, I clerked for a federal district judge in the United States, in the Southern District of New York. And my judge was Judge Kimba M. Wood, who is an incredible judge to this day and was and is an incredible mentor for me. And then I came immediately after clerking, I came to Paul Weiss in Hong Kong and met Jeanette Chan. And Jeanette Chan is and continues to be an incredible mentor for me. This is not to say that I didn't, even in those early days, run into obstacles for being who I am. So when I came to Paul Weiss right after clerking, I already had a 1-year-old baby. And when I came to Paul Weiss and we had the first sort of firm event, and the managing partner's wife of that time was at that event, and she literally came up to me and said, I couldn't believe that Paul Weiss gave you an offer. And it was clear that the reason she couldn't believe it was that I had a baby. And and I didn't even know what to say to her at the time because I just thought this was a little bit insane. But you know, it is a difficulty, and it is much credit to Jeanette that she stuck with me, not only through that baby, but through another baby um, that I had later when I was at Paul Weiss. And I had also clients who were very good to me. When I had my second child in 1999, I came back to Paul Weiss after my maternity leave in about August or September 1999, and I was immediately thrown into writing a bunch of letters of intent for a wonderful woman named Selena Chow, who now has Horizons Ventures. And these letters of intent were about what was then just her brainchild, and became Tom.com. And 6 months, it did not exist at all when I came back from maternity leave in September 1999. 6 months later, it was listed on the GEM board of the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. And it was a real roller coaster ride. But the interesting thing is, as many places as I had to travel in China during those 6 months to negotiate deals for Tom.com, I took my baby with me and my helper. And because I was breastfeeding my baby, and the only way to continue doing that was with my baby to come with me. And both Jeanette and Selena completely supported me in this. I can remember being on a flight from Hong Kong to Shanghai with Selena and having my baby with me. And Selena wanted to hold my baby. And I looked at that cashmere sweater she was wearing that probably cost, thousands and thousands of US dollars. I said, no, please, please don't hold my baby, but thank you for your support. I continued, and as I continued in my career and became more senior, one of the things that I definitely had to negotiate was having the right degree of confidence and gravitas in my speech, and not being accused, usually by male colleagues, of being sharp-elbowed. I've also always had a certain amount of gravitas in how I speak, and that can be very threatening to people, especially male colleagues. When I was at Ropes and Gray, one of the partners in our Shanghai office, every time we would interview a female partner candidate, every single time in his written comments, he would say, she has sharp elbows. He would never say this about a man. And it is a problem that we as women, we have to live in a real world. We can't ignore what the world is and just think it should be as we want to, but we still have to be careful about how we present ourselves so that people's fragile egos will not be upset. I to this day, when I write an email, I write it, and then I go back and I put in the sort of womanly part. I put in a happy part at the beginning, a happy part at the end. I try to dumb down some of the words so they don't sound as aggressive. And I look at the emails who come from my male partners, and they don't look like that. They can be as aggressive as they want. So we do still have problems out there, but and we do have to admit that they're there, and we have to rewrite our emails so that they're acceptable to our male colleagues. But we have come a long way. I've been doing this in Hong Kong for almost 30 years now, and I have seen immense changes. And it's not just Hong Kong. In the field I'm in, private equity, globally, there are very few women in this field, both on the legal side and especially on the investment professional side. There are very few women in this field. I was at a conference last November or October in New York City, and I was shocked how few women there were in the room. Because I had come to think, oh, it's only here in Asia that we're like this, but the United States, New York is the same way. So it's something we have to deal with. It's something we have to understand. But what Jeanette taught me over and over again was, in some negotiations in China, it's something that we can use to our benefit. Because when you're negotiating with a company on behalf of a private equity fund, the CEO of the company is much less likely, if you're representing if you're a woman negotiating for the private equity fund, the CEO is much less likely to have his hackles up. He's much less likely to think that you're trying to do something tricky. You're trying he's much more likely to just believe what you say is correct, and you're not trying to hurt him because you're a woman. And that's just something we have to deal with. And it is something that we can use to our benefit. And Jeanette very much taught me that in how she negotiated. One other thing about myself that has impacted my career is that I am Jewish, and I observe the Sabbath. So from sundown on Friday to sunset on Saturday, I don't use my phone. I don't use any electricity. Turning it on and off. I can have the lights on at home, but I don't do anything. And so and it's amazing in Hong Kong how clients have often been so not just tolerant of it, but they've completely adjusted to it and respect it. During the time I was doing Tom.com, I can remember one time it was Friday afternoon, and the guy from Tom.com, who I was often contacted with, calls me on the phone, and he said, we were having a board meeting and we saw the sun was going down, so we adjourned the board meeting so that I could call you. So people have been, in general, incredibly tolerant of my religious observance and respectful of that. But one thing I'd like to talk about particularly here is, because of what's happening in the market, and I know that all of you are quite aware that the economy is not great, that the market is not great, and it's not clear, especially for those of us who do China-related work, it's not clear when this is going to clear up. And so I could see from a student perspective, and maybe even from some of the alum perspective, that is sort of the cloud that is overhanging everything you do. And so one thing I wanted to talk about was that in order to make a career here, what I have found my entire career is that you have to be, the most important characteristic is that you are ready to pivot at any one time. When I first started out, Jeanette and I were doing joint ventures in China, FDI, strict FDI. If you did that now, that would be ridiculous, right? There are very good PRC law firms who can do that. But that's what we were doing. We were doing telecoms related joint ventures in China. And then I started to pivot because our clients started to want to do minority investments in internet companies as the internet started to be a thing. And so I pivoted to doing offshore minority investments where the underlying asset was an internet company in China. And then I started pivoting as my billing rate became higher, and as the cost became more, and those minority investments were something that lower level firms would do. I started pivoting to doing much more complicated deals, buyouts, and consortium vehicles acquiring U.S. listed companies, et cetera. And always I was pivoting to the thing that could sustain me, that could sustain my practice, that was going to work. And I saw many people along the way who just fell by the wayside. they could never figure out how to do anything except FDI, joint ventures onshore in China. So their practice was overtaken by PRC law firms doing that, and they could never do it again. People who did tiny VC investments, and then PRC law firms started doing those VC investments even when they were in Cayman companies, and they just had to leave the practice. What you need to always do is be ready to pivot. So right now is definitely a pivot point, especially for younger lawyers and for the students that are near graduation. You have to think of, what can I pivot to that's going to make me survive through this era of economic difficulty? Is it that, you want to get really involved in ESG? Maybe you want to get an ESG certificate because there's a great need for ESG professionals. And people in law are really good at that because they can deal with the ESG law along with other things. Is it that you want to go and become a Greater Bay Area lawyer and get that qualification? One of my colleagues did that in the first batch. Go ahead for that. Is it that you want to learn about AI, artificial intelligence law, and all the law related to that so that you can advise on that? And you need to think of something that's going to allow you to pivot. Don't try to make yourself do something that you're completely not interested in. If you can't stand technology, don't do that. But think about something that you're interested in that you can pivot to. Maybe you need another master's degree or something in order to, or certification to do that. But think of something you can pivot to, and make yourself a person who this market wants. There's something in the market that wants to hire you, and also just gives you something interesting to do. And just one last point is that I really want to put in a plea, especially for people who are at law firms or will be at law firms, is Hong Kong needs to do a much better job of incorporating ethnic minority Hong Kong people into our law firms. Right now, many of our law firms say, oh, if you can't speak Mandarin fluently, if you can't speak Cantonese fluently, we don't want you at our law firm. And you've got brilliant ethnic minority law students who are graduating and who have great difficulty finding any positions in the law, even though they are very smart, their English is native, and they studied law and they're very good at it. Law firms need to do a better job at incorporating them into law firms. That's all I'll say.
Thank you so much, Marcia. So you really answered a lot of the top questions on our alumni and students' mind. Yeah, in particular, your practical tip, in the difficult macro market environment, what's the best way going forward? It's the continuous readiness to learn, to pivot, and to evolve. So thank you for sharing this, top tip for us. And there are many questions I want to follow up. How you mentioned about how you juggle motherhood and how there's the double standard when women speak and when women write emails. I do want to follow up on that. How do we stay feminine but be someone who's seen as competent and with authority? So we'll continue with that discussion later on. So thank you so much, Marcia, for your wisdom. Moving on to Connie. Thank you.
Thank you. And hello, everyone. I'm delighted that Associate Dean Queenie Lai and the distinguished members of CU Hong Kong Law has decided to invite me to share my story and experience today. I have to say, I'm very humbled to be alongside two women lawyers I greatly admire and have looked up to Teresa and Marcia. So thank you. Well, to the next generation of talented legal and business minds in the audience, you all have very bright futures ahead of you. And so, it's an honor as well as a privilege to be here with you, not just as APAC regional managing partner of Clifford Chance, but also as a lawyer and a female lawyer who has been in your shoes once and has navigated the highs and lows of the legal profession. So I'm here to share my story, and maybe like Marcia, I'll just tell you my journey. It's not a unique one, but it's probably reflective of part of the collective narrative of female legal leaders in Hong Kong who have risen and thrived based on merit. And I hope through our stories today and storytelling, it inspires you to bright careers and an ambition to achieve. So my career journey, I think it's probably shaped by key moments and by two key words. Why not, right? Why not? Question mark. So I come from a fairly traditional Chaozhou family of 3 girls. Now, 3 girls, Chaozhou family. I'm the eldest. And for those of you who are familiar with the Chaozhou community, you will know that a lot of people are, small business owners, entrepreneurs, and boys are typically prioritized for education and career. Not that different in my family. And so because there were no boys in my family, my father thought, why not give the girls, my sisters and I, the opportunities for education? Okay, so from the beginning, I was taught as the eldest daughter that, you can't limit yourself and you need to seize every opportunity that comes your way. And I'm also incredibly grateful for this privilege because it gave me a certain level of naivete. I also went to an all-girls school for 10 years, actually 12 years, and where I was taught anything is possible. So then in my early education, I was better with numbers than I was with words. And so when I was choosing subjects, going to university, I wanted to study law. I didn't want to study law, but I wanted to study economics and finance. I had never thought I'd be a lawyer. But being very practical Chinese parents, my father said to me, as a lawyer and as a professional, there is no capex, there's no capital expenditure. You don't need to expend cash to set up your business. Everything you know is in your mind and you bring with it everywhere. You are your own business. At that time, I didn't understand what he meant. So being, from a Chinese traditional family, I did what my parents wanted. I studied law. I mean, the choices were medicine, engineering, accounting, or law. Because sure enough, once you're out of school, you have a job, right? That's the thinking. So I chose to study law. And after that, after I graduated, my mother said, well, why don't you just qualify? At least you get your practicing certificate, right? That's practical. And then you can decide what you want to do after that. At that point, I decided I didn't want to live at home anymore. So I wanted to go somewhere else where I didn't have to live at home. And looking, that was in Singapore, and looking at choices then, Hong Kong was very popular as a place for lawyers from Singapore to fly and come in and work. London was the other choice, but I thought I couldn't bear with the weather in the UK. So Hong Kong was nearer and also better weather. That was in 1997, okay, a long time ago. And for those of you who know about 1997, you remember there was a huge stock market crash. I remember I had 1 or 2 job offers in hand. And I called the law firms that offered me a job and I said, hey, I'm going to resign and move. Are you going to keep the job for me? So anyway, they said they did, and I came, and that was almost 25 years ago. So I've been in Hong Kong ever since. Hong Kong has become my home. And in Hong Kong, I've met my husband and enjoyed having 2 children, 2 daughters who are in their teens now. And as it turned out, despite not wanting to be a lawyer from the start, I probably became a fairly decent one. And the bulk of the time I've spent at CC has been a capital markets lawyer. But just picking up on Marcia's point, there were a lot of pivoting moments because coming to Hong Kong in 1997, there wasn't really a capital markets to speak of, for those of you who remember. So I started my life as a banking lawyer doing finance work. And I guess as a fairly junior lawyer, and luckily for me, there was a lot of restructuring work to do. So I started life doing restructurings and supporting the litigation department. But that was good because I picked up a lot of skills that you don't normally see in an upmarket. Now, after doing a bunch of restructuring work, I thought, hey, I actually want to do some primary work where people aren't so anxious and people are happy at the end of a transaction. And that was also when the .com boom started. So in 1999, I pivoted to doing capital markets work and did my fair share of .com IPOs. until the dot-com bubble burst. And then I pivoted to doing distressed sales, distressed debt work, NPL repackaging, tax structured finance, everything you can think of under the sun. So I have pivoted in a few points in time. And each time, I guess it's really important to be open-minded. And you can realize that actually you do have a base set of skills that you can call upon to bear, no matter which practice area or which product you get into. Which is the long way of saying, hey, don't limit yourself. It's important to try new things out and go with the market, to consider different paths and also what you enjoy and where your skills and abilities might be most valuable and where you can make a difference. So I guess ultimately in 2007, when the debt capital market started out in earnest, I focused more on debt capital markets work. But before that, I've probably been a jack of many trades. Maybe just now, I don't want to spend too much time carrying on this journey, but I do want to just talk about leadership, because all of you in the audience, you are a leader in your own way. You might manage people, you might be a leader in your community, you might be a leader in a study group. So I do want to touch a little bit more on leadership. Becoming a leader actually requires change, right? Because it requires, I feel, required me to be more open, is not actually doing the best work for, just doing the best work for clients, but it's also being about a role model, and more importantly, a cheerleader for your people, for your teams, and being an ambassador for the firm, and helping clients solve problems, of course. Now, you might be wondering how this is relevant when, you know, a lot of you are just starting out your careers. But I want to talk about this because I think we all need to look forward, right? And in your own way, as a leader in your own way, there are things that you could do to influence things and also plan for the future. So one thing I wish I did more of earlier on in my career was probably going out and building more relationships and building more networks. Now, Marcia mentioned motherhood, you know, trying to juggle. It's tough trying to juggle, right? Kids at home and client demands, and maybe even some time for yourself. It's always difficult to try and juggle so many things. And maybe some of us have also obligations for elderly care, which in Asia is not uncommon. So, hey, there are 4 balls you're juggling. And oftentimes we will say, actually, well, let's just focus on getting the work done, give it to the clients, and then leave and go home. But what I would say is important to build those relationships because they actually will help serve you. One other thing that I did want to mention is, you know, there's a lot of talk in the market about that kind of imposter syndrome and am I qualified enough? Now, I just want to tell my own story too, because I was first approached by the partnership for my first leadership role as head of capital markets for APAC. That was back in 2015 for the region. And at that time, I asked myself as well, like, am I ready? Would I have the time? And then I wrote down lists of pros and cons as a good lawyer would. You know, you mind map everything out. And then I asked my husband, you know, do you think I should do this? Because it's going to take a lot more time. And he looked at me and he said, why not? Just do it. What are you afraid of? That was probably quite a good moment. And I kind of woke up because I realized that maybe he was right. Let's be open, nothing to be afraid of. Because as the eldest child, I am quite competitive too. And I was like, okay, well, what am I afraid of? Well, let me try and overcome those demons. And in being open in mindset, I think there are probably 3 points I would take away. Well, firstly, I think, you know, in becoming a leader, I think there's a wider question, you know, that women need a lot of encouragement and they need a lot of role modeling. So if women see more women in leadership positions, I think it actually encourages them to step up, to say, actually, it is possible. So that's the advocacy and the encouragement part. And secondly, I think the other point that I realized is the success of a leader ultimately is the success of the team, because a leader of one is not a leader. And don't be afraid to ask for help. Initially, when I first started, I felt I had to do everything myself, but no, I think there are others that can help you. And I think that's also when you can celebrate collective success together. So to give an example, I was for a long time the only woman on our firm's executive leadership group. I was one person. Now, did I feel weird? Probably not, because I mentioned that, I went to all-girls school. I never thought that there was a glass ceiling. I never thought that, there were things women couldn't do. But I think over time, it showed me, and the executive leadership of the firm changed its ratio. So we're now nearly half of our executive leadership group are women. It's definitely brought a lot of perspective. And that community, right? That team of women in the senior levels, that's actually been very helpful in bringing perspective and helping me advocate for certain issues as well. So I think that's the other point, that you do have to build a team around you of trusted allies, of people you can depend on and work with. Now, thirdly, I think there's no one size fits all, right? So, Marcia mentioned that there's a way that, women come across and when they write emails or when they speak. But I think it's important that everybody realizes that everyone can be a leader in your own way and your own style. And actually, for me, parenthood has really helped me translate some of the parenting skills I use into valuable leadership skills. In flexing when you're tough with the kids, when you're soft with the kids. I'm not saying that our team are kids, but actually those skills which I never found, but I had to learn as a parent, has been super helpful. And I've been fortunate to have had great role models and mentors, and also to try and pick up those skills that I see and go, oh, actually that's pretty good. I want to have that skill. So often, last point maybe is just to mention, as women in particular, we often feel that we need to do everything 100% or know the subject 120% before we raise our hand to take on a challenge or do a task. Actually, I think don't let perfection be the enemy of brilliance, right? So don't let that hinder you to take on a new challenge. It's okay to not to get everything perfect. Keep everything juggling, because there are days when I struggle to juggle as well. And sometimes one ball drops, right? You pick it up and you keep juggling. So I think maybe in closing, I just want to mention to all the aspiring female practitioners in the audience and students, I hope you take with you in your journey that mindset of openness, the ability to go with the times, pivot, and embrace challenges, be open to taking challenges. Be open to asking for help, and remember also to help others. So women need to help other women to achieve. So the path is yours. It's very exciting. The world of work is changing very quickly. And I'm really excited to see that future of our profession now in your hands. So thank you again for having me here.
Thank you, Connie. Thank you so much for your warm and honest sharing. I have so much points that you've mentioned that echoes with me. I'm also the eldest child, and I also grew up in girls' school, and it's the supportive family conditioning, that, and also you mentioned about imposter syndrome, being a perfectionist, all these, and being the only woman in the boardroom. So thank you for sharing with us. I would say 10 years ago, no one can imagine for an international law firm there would be an Asian woman being the Asia managing partner. So thank you for paving the way for the next generation. So it's wonderful to hear we all face similar issues. But of course, we'll continue to discuss about how we should embrace challenges and opportunities at the Q&A session. So thank you, Connie. Teresa, can I hand over to you? Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, thank you very much, Queenie and Chinese University, for inviting me to join the Female Legal Leaders Seminar. I feel very honored to have this opportunity to speak, at the same platform as Marcia and Connie. So in the next 15 to 20 minutes, what I hope to be able to do is to share some of my own story on my, journey in my legal career, what has now changed, and what we are looking for in our future trainees, and what wisdom, if I could put it that way, I can share with you all today. So let me start with my own little story. I was born in Hong Kong, hated school, and frankly never saw the point of it. I think in today's term, people would say that I probably had ADHD and no active listening, because I just felt that I learned nothing from the early years of my childhood. And at age 13, I was packed off to a boarding school in the UK, where my parents decided that it's about time somebody else have a go at educating me. So I landed in a convent, not speaking much English, I have to say. So it was a pretty harrowing experience. And it was a school which was staffed and run by real nuns wearing black habits. And if you didn't know what they are, because I think these days it's very few of them, I think you could still Google and look how kind of solemn they all look. But the place was beautiful because it was once the palace of Anne Boleyn, who was the second wife of Henry VIII, but she was beheaded, actually. That's how she ended her life. Now, at the boarding school, I didn't study much either, but I did want to be a fashion designer. But my dad didn't think it was a proper profession, and I knew he wouldn't argue with the law. So law was what I put down on my application for university. I didn't get into the university of my choice, and I also hated the study of the law when I first started. So I ran home and I wanted to switch out of the law. My father was very stern, being Chinese, and the conversation didn't go well. He basically said, you have to finish what you start off with. And I burst into tears, and my mother, who is always very good at resolving kind of tense family situations, basically said, don't cry, let's all have dinner. And that was the end of that conversation. So I thought to myself, now I'm completely stuck, but maybe, having been humiliated that I didn't even get to the university of my choice, it's about time that I pull my finger out and make something out of it. So I did redeem myself by not only getting one first-class honors degree, but I managed to get two, and the second one was from Cambridge University. So I decided fairly early on that I did actually have a brain, if I can just put it to use. So after that, I worked in the City of London for 4 years, 2 as a trainee solicitor and 2 as a junior solicitor, before I came back and joined Freshfields, and that was in 1988. So people always ask me, what was it like when you first joined Freshfields? I mean, in 1988, I think it's fair to say that nobody had, heard of Freshfields at all, because it was a tiny office, and basically it had 3 partners and 5 lawyers. And the word I would use was terrifying, because on the first day I joined, the only other Chinese speaking lawyer, who was also from Hong Kong, came up to me at about 10 o'clock and said, how come it took you so long to arrive? I tendered my resignation this morning. And I thought, oh my God, what's happened to this firm? And I rang up my mother, and in a sort of, comforting and reassuring way. And she said, well, you have arrived there now, just see how it goes. And, it's not as if you can kind of also resign at the same time. So I thought, okay, but it was sort of like every day you don't know what's going to happen, and then instead of doing corporate work, which I thought I'd signed up for, I was plunged into the deep end of aircraft financing, and it was involuntary pivot, if I could describe it that way, picking up a term which Marcia used. And I basically did 3 years of aircraft financing, And I lived in Kowloon Tong at the time, and every day I had to walk down Kent Road in order to take the underground to come to Central Exchange Square to go to work. And every day I come across a road sweeper. And I still remember vividly that I used to think that his life was so much better than mine, because he knows exactly what he was doing. He can see what he's done. And every day he can go home thinking that he'd done a great job. Whereas the reverse of all of those 3 points was true as far as I'm concerned. As far as I was concerned, I barely knew what I was doing, and I didn't know whether what I've done is always right. And then every day I go home thinking that, oh my God, you know, it was an awful day. I didn't get this right. I had, you know, red ink over all my draft. But then I did persevere. And then I think, and then my then boss, who was a man of very few words, did say to me, you know, if you were good enough, you can turn your hands to everything. And this is something that had stayed with me in my own career. So, and then I think life took to a turn. And when one day, when I was knee deep with some corporate work, in fact, it was a restructuring of South China Morning Post, actually, I remember one of the partners came in and said, oh my God, this job has to be for you. And I said, look, I'm really quite busy now, thinking that, you know, somebody else can pick it up. But it was an invitation to speak on how to list state-owned enterprises, companies on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange in Beijing. And then he said, we have to deliver a speech and only you can speak Chinese. And I said, but I don't speak Mandarin. He said, well, it's much easier for you to kind of pick up Mandarin than all of us when nobody can even speak Cantonese. So I tried to explain that Cantonese is actually different from Mandarin, but I knew that there was no point protesting because I'm never going to win that argument. So the next thing I did was to ring up my Mandarin tutor. And then the lesson learned had been, you know, how to order Peking duck until that point of time. And then there was a big kind of rally up into learning how to deliver a speech. So the speech was written by our London office because I had up to that point in time not really done any capital markets work. Then I learned it as if I was learning a song, and I deliver the speech almost singing it as if it is a little operetta. So as luck would have it, soon after that experience, our firm was asked to team up with a local law firm. The name of it was Carey and Low at the time. And then basically ended up working on what had become the first Hong Kong and US dual listing of Shanghai Petrochemical. And that was 1993. And at the same time, I turned my hand to Chinese joint ventures because the firm had started thinking of investing in China as well in terms of, you know, partners. And we brought on a big team of partners from another law firm. And I wanted to make sure that I'm exposed to that and trying to be part of the future. And I worked on the first Chinese joint venture, acting for Swire Pacific and P&O, which is Peninsula and some navigation company, and acting opposite China Merchant and Costco. And I still remember it was an exhilarating experience, you know, and I was declared to be, I think in those days, too thorough, because I would kind of like try to get to the bottom of everything, which did not go down very well with the counterpart. But it was a really eye-opening experience, and it was and then after a 2-night all-nighters, I discovered that I was pregnant with my first child, Jonathan, and that was actually 1994. And I also had my daughter Isabel just before the handover in 1993. So in terms of my career, I would describe it into kind of 3 big chunks. The first 10 years, it was sort of doing anything and everything that came through the door, but with quite a lot of aircraft financing, and then ending up with the IPO of China Mobile, which was then, you know, the largest IPO that Hong Kong had ever seen, and really put myself and our firm on the IPO map. The second chunk was really very, very intense kind of, you know, deal after deal, record-breaking IPOs after IPOs, and which was described as the super IPOs. And I recently was invited to go into Hong Kong Stock Exchange Stock Connect with a client as part of the celebration of an anniversary. And I saw that out of the 10 largest IPOs that Hong Kong had ever seen, I'd actually led on 8 of them. So that was quite a high moment for me. And including, you know, some of the super IPOs, and like all the, you know, 5 national banks, and then I think in the year 2000 in the year 2000, this was during the middle chunk, when I listed China Unicom, we raised $5 billion. And compared to $7 million US, which was the size of my first IPO acting for Standard Chartered, I thought I'd really come a long way. And I never thought that I was ever going to break that record. But how did I know that 5 years later in 2010, when we helped Agricultural Bank of China to list, they raised $22 billion. And if we were able to list Ant Financial, having raised $35 billion, that would have been the world's largest IPO that, you know, I would have been involved in. But anyway, and I think the fact that I started in a small firm in Hong Kong meant that I was able to turn my hand onto different types of work, which I do think that, especially in today's environment, it is very important. So I worked on many M&A transactions, and in the earlier years helped, you know, DBS to take over Dao Hang Bank, which is still has a record of being the most expensive banking takeover in Hong Kong ever, and acted for China Construction Bank to buy their 18 branches from the Bank of America. That was in 2006. And I have actually some very, very, and sort of like that really enjoyed was helping HSBC to make their first ever investment in Bank of Communication. And that was also in 2005, and then had some exhilarating time helping China Unicom to merge into Netcom as part of China's restructuring of the telecommunication sector. And then, of course, for a local deal, the corporate reorganization of Cheung Kong and Hutchison, that was 2015. Now, so I think it is important to say that what I really relished is the ability to use my experience and to kind of create some changes to the local market. And this range from, you know, something that is so normal now, like a book build roadshow. I think all the earlier deals I was involved in, they were just fixed price and there's no roadshow. And then I think at the time of the China Mobile IPO in 1997, we introduced the concept of corporate investors, which has now been evolved into the cornerstone investment. And then we actually helped to introduce EIPO into Hong Kong, the electronic initial public offering services, and the PHIP in order to deal with the fact that the Shanghai regime allows the listing committee proof to be published to the market, you know, and that has to be done ahead of the Hong Kong listing committee approval process. So I think I was able to use kind of what I had learned, and then obviously, you know, and the ability to brainstorm with everyone to how to introduce some new techniques and new features to the market. And this is something that I relished a lot throughout my career. I think the thing that I also enjoyed a lot, and in some ways had really helped me to continue to be, you know, so enthusiastic about the ability to kind of influence change and help clients, is my public service appointments. And in fact, I was my first public appointment was actually in 2002, when I was appointed to an organization which is called TIC. And when I first picked up the call from the government, I thought they were talking about the Trade Development Council, but in fact it was not TDC, it was TIC. And this entity had now been changed in nature, because I think at that time it was a self-regulatory body for the tour guides, tour operators industry. So, and then I was tapped on the shoulder in 2006 to be a member of the listing committee, and I was made into a deputy chair immediately, and I became chair. And then I sat on Hong Kong Monetary Authority's advisory committee, EFACT, and then no sooner had I finished my 6-year term on the listing committee, I became a non-executive independent director of the SFC, and the most recent and the current appointment is the vice chair of the IFRS Foundation. And I think as the vice chair of the IFRS Foundation, for the 3 years during COVID, I've coined it the night job, because I was fortunate enough to have been involved in the establishment of the International Sustainability Standards Board. And I think that had really opened my, you know, eyes to the range of activities and all the problems that we are seeing with the sustainability disclosure. So and which has led me to start a little nonprofit called Métier Minus, which sources and sells post-love luxury fashion pieces to raise funds for women empowerment. If you're not aware of that, you know, please forgive me to give it a little plug, and follow our IG. And we also have a website under Métier Minus. Now, so I was going to touch on a few things. The first is the changes I've seen. Now, when I started, the fastest way to deliver a piece of advice is by courier, right? You rang for someone who is going to wait for you downstairs, and then they will take a bike, and it might take 3 hours if the client lives in, you know, I started in England, so it would take 3 hours, and then a poor chap will ride down on the motorway, and then it would deliver it to, I don't know, another place. But I saw the arrival of a fax machine, the first fax machine, and it was, I guess, bigger than like 10 fridges putting together. I mean, it was really a huge piece of equipment. And I still remember thinking to myself, oh my God, you know, the client is going to get this advice instantaneously, and then we better get on with it. And in those days, I think, you know, we don't do our own typing. As a trainee, you have to be really nice to the secretaries, because you're like the lowest kind of like in the food chain, and they would do the work for the partners and the solicitor, and then you would wait for your turn to get your things typed up. But we know that we lived in a very, very different world from the world that we grew up in. And the world is getting more and more complex and more uncertain, you know, with your political fragmentation, you know, war in the Middle East and Ukraine, and US and China tension. So, and there's also a lot of focus on ESG and sustainability, and climate change is also shifting business towards a green transition. Technology has and will continue to impact the legal profession. We didn't have cell phones when we started. We now have a few, and you know, we didn't have equipments. But the plus side is that we're much more mobile, we're much more flexible. You know, we can work from home, we can actually, you know, take our equipment anywhere we go. And so there is a lot of plus side to all these changes, even though that, you know, to a lot of young people who might kind of be feeling very anxious as to, you know, how is it going to evolve. At the most extreme, you're going to say, is robot and ChatGPT going to take over everything that we do? My answer to this question is, I don't think so, because the rule of law has to be upheld by people. And we're at the forefront of that activity as, you know, lawyers. And so I do think that, you know, there is still a very bright future, but the process of kind of like understanding the situation, delivering an advice may be different. And there is still going to be the judgment that you will need to kind of learn through experience in order for you to be able to be of service to our clients and to the community. Now, we have continued to be our clients' ears and eyes and a trusted advisor. And then I think you know, I think there is still a lot that we can do to help with what the needs of the clients are. Now, so what do we look for in our future trainees and lawyer? I would give a couple of adjectives. The first is intellect. I think we are still need. I mean, the law is a tough business, and I think if given the choice, we will still look for people with strong intellect. That means a mental capacity to understand, to weigh up the evidence, to apply logic, and to solve problems. Because at the end of the day, I think we're a problem-solving profession, right? And we need people with integrity. That means that we have to have people who are honest, who have strong moral principles. We would want people to act in an exemplary way, because we have to be trustworthy to be trusted. And we have to play fair, we have to be responsible, and we have to have the moral courage to do the right thing. And I think the best part of what I do is to be able to influence the course of action, in my opinion. I think that I would hate to be someone who basically just tell you what the law is, because we don't need everyone to do that. I think ChatGPT will tell you actually what the law is. So we want to be able to say, you know, on the one hand, you can do this. On the other hand, you can do this, the pros and cons. But if I were you, I would do this. And sometimes we don't get there. Sometimes, you know, they decide to do something else, which can be very frustrating. But I think in an ideal world, I think we want to encourage, guide, and advise and inspire people to do the right thing. And that is what gives me the greatest joy. So the third kind of qualities that I'm looking for is for people who are interested in business as well as people. So it's not just business, because businesses are all managed by people. So you have to have an interest in, you know, how people behave and, you know, what leadership is all about. And then the next one is people who believe that they are able to grow. So the growth mindset. And it is something that I cannot agree more, that even though you may not know, but if you are prepared to, you know, invest time in it, you can study it and you can make it your own. And, you know, we need people who have the capacity to learn if they choose to. And the last is dedication, and but with a positive outlook. You know, I wouldn't say that being a lawyer is a walk in the park. There's a lot of hard work, but I think we should also be positive. And if you always see the sort of, you know, darker side of things, you know, the negative side of things, then law is probably not for you. So another question that people ask is, oh, should I get qualified, you know, in everywhere? I think qualifications are good, But I wouldn't say, but it's not the paper qualifications that make you into a good lawyer, but the things, the experience of studying and learning that will help you along the way. For example, there is currently a 3-year pilot scheme which allows eligible, Hong Kong legal practitioners to practice in 9 mainland cities in Greater Bay Area. And I wouldn't, ignore it out of hand. But if this is something that you're interested in, I mean, certainly you can explore it. And getting multiple legal qualifications is not a bad thing. And people ask me, should I get a US qualification? Why not a UK qualification? And you are qualified outside of Hong Kong, get a Hong Kong qualification. So I am all supportive of getting more qualifications. But at the end of the day, it is not the certificate, it is giving you flexibility so that you can have more options to yourself. The last bit that I want to share with you is, what have I learned from my own journey? I think that the first point is, and I would quote somebody, and who is Benjamin Franklin, who said that energy and persistence conquers all things. Now, I felt that if I had not persevered, notwithstanding, for the initial period, it was not that enjoyable and it was quite tough and you never know what it's going to happen next. But I persevered and I started to enjoy what I did. So I think my advice would be, don't give up too easily. Now, you're all going to live to 100, if not beyond. So in that context, investing a few years to see whether, you are really not cut out to be a lawyer is worth doing. You've come this far already. Even when you become a trainee solicitor, you felt that it was not to your liking, then maybe is it the people, is it the nature of the work? Because the legal practice is very broad. And so I think perseverance is important. And then I think setbacks to me are not failures if you deal with them proactively and you learn the lessons from them. So the first point is, please, persevere, because I think that is very important. And the second point is, you really get as much as you put in. So a lot of people say, oh, well, you are on this committee, you are on that committee, and it looks very glamorous, it looks very important, but there is a lot of hard work that goes in that nobody knows. On the listing committee, every Wednesday and every weekend, if you have a policy meeting, you have to invest time. But if you didn't invest time, you didn't read the papers, you're not going to get as much out of it as you can. So at the end of the day, the experience you gain working in the trenches is second to none. So build your experience, even though that it means that you have to spend extra time. I think that in any profession, any job or any occupation, it is the experience that counts. Experience can be good, can be bad, but all forms of experience is golden. I would go on to say, as much as that. So, I mean, we all know if we choose whether a doctor, a dentist, a beautician, you want somebody who has done it before. And which is why I think, we need to go and expose ourselves and get as much of experience as you can be. Now, the third point, hopefully will be music to some of your ears, which is don't give up your outside interests in the pursuit of a legal career. Now, we only have 24 hours a day, and we all know that, the legal business is sometimes an all-consuming business. We are on the demands of our client, we sell our time. So sometimes it's very difficult to make time for personal things. If you have to give time to your family, your children, and I always think that, the individual, especially the female, ended up being the person who has no time for herself. And then let alone any hobbies that you want to pursue. A couple of years before, I mentioned this to my senior partner, and he said to me, no, you have a hobby, which is shopping. Now, I certainly don't consider that to be a hobby, but I think it is very important. And I think the times have changed. It used to be the way that, if you say that, look, I have to go out for my Pilates class, people might even frown on you doing this. But now it is actually accepted because exercise is actually so important to ensure that you have the right mental framework and it's good for well-being. So don't give up all the hobbies that you had when you were at school or when you were at university. Continue to pursue them and continue to pursue them with intent, whether it be learning a language or, kind of like learning a new skill as well. And the last is invest in your personal growth and development. Now, outside of legal skills, there is a lot of things which will shape what sort of lawyer you want to be. If you want to do technology, understanding how coding work helps. If you want to do international work, then acquiring another language helps. So, but knowledge acquisition has to be intentional. So be thoughtful about it. And these days, I mean, it can be just so confusing deciding what to learn, because I've picked up that, and Marcia will have heard me saying this, even universities are entering into the Taylor Swift era, because I've picked up that the Harvard University, in the English literature section, they now have a class on Taylor Swift and her world. And so as not to be missed out, Arizona State University has a core on the psychology of Taylor Swift, which covers the psychology of music, social media, revenge, and romantic relationships. So of course, I have to make a plug that the Hong Kong government has given, subsidies for those who take accredited course on sustainability. So is sustainability, climate change, is environmental, is something that you want to pursue? Yes. In addition, look out for additional course, whether you do them whilst you're practicing, or in between. This is something which you might want to think about. So in closing, I want to say that it is a very exciting time for each and every one of you. You have already come a long way. I think that the last few words that I want to say is, you want to be part of tomorrow, and I wish you all the greatest success in pursuing what you really want to do. But reflection and thinking is needed, and at the end of the day, you are your own master, and I wish you all the best in your own journey. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Teresa, for sharing your wisdom and experience. And we really enjoyed your amusing stories of Freshfields in the early days and delivering your speech in a practical way. And also, the changes, for Hong Kong and the world capital markets over the years. So thank you so much for your sharing and wisdom. An interesting common theme that I noted, that none of all three distinguished leaders here today wanted to be a lawyer in the first place. So it's interesting. All right. Okay. So we'll move on to Q&A session. So I've thank you for all the questions that were submitted. So the first question I have, it's which is a recurring theme. It's perhaps the progress and change in Hong Kong over the years. So how do you think women representation has changed throughout your career? You all mentioned being the sole women in the boardroom, or only women in the boardroom in the male-dominated industry. Hong Kong Stock Exchange recently introduced, new listing rules about that no single gender board for listed companies are no longer acceptable. Do you think, in your opinion, what you've witnessed over the history or the past years, do you think Hong Kong is progressing fast enough in terms of gender diversity compared to other countries? And how do we overcome resistance to change? What do you think are future trends? Perhaps I'll go with Marcia first. Thanks.
I think that, Hong Kong has made a lot of progress with gender diversity. And even in the early days, I would say that Hong Kong was, when you would go to a large company like Hutchison or something, even 30 years ago, there were actually women in very important positions in Hutchison. So Hong Kong, to me, has always been doing a good job with this. we need to work more on the listed company boards. And certainly Teresa has done great work in being a great advocate of the Hong Kong Stock Exchange issuing their rules requiring prohibiting single gender boards by the end of this year. What I worry about more is that those single gender boards, the one woman who's on those boards is going to be the same woman. There's going to be a tremendous amount of overboarding, and there's going to be the one person that everybody trusts, and they're going to all put them on their boards. And Hong Kong already has a huge overboarding issue. And the other thing I worry about is that we're all focusing on just the gender on those boards rather than other diversity elements. And again, ethnic minorities who are Hong Kong people who have been in Hong Kong for generations are treated often as if they are not real citizens, and that's a problem.
Thank you, Marcia. Connie.
Oh, I can't agree more. I think definitely with the changes in the regulations and the listing rules, it helps to start somewhere where the regulator comes out and says, actually, single gender board is no longer acceptable. And you see that around the region, you see that globally. So it's a great step Hong Kong's taken. Maybe without repeating too much of what Marcia's got to say, maybe on the supply end, because you have the demand, or you have the prescriptive demand, then you need the supply, right? You need women. So to avoid that situation where the same senior women are on all the boards, and to increase the supply, I do think that there has to be an increased level of awareness as to how do you prepare for getting on a board. It doesn't just happen, right? And as we know, women may need more prep. They feel they need to prepare. And I think that there is an opportunity for women to join maybe NGO boards to start with, charities where you can serve, do something good for the community, but also pick up some skills, get to see what a board looks like. And that's what we've been encouraging our partners to do, because as partners in law firms, we can't so easily serve on boards for various reasons. But we've been encouraging our colleagues to serve on NGOs. So that's one opportunity. But the other opportunity as well is greater advocacy by different industry bodies. Hong Kong Stock Exchange has already taken the step, but also to go to the businesses, to the listed companies, to articulate the importance of that. So I think it's a combination of different things to support what the regulator's doing, and to increase that awareness in the community, but also encourage our women to step forward.
Thank you, Connie. And Teresa, please.
Thank you, Queenie. I agree with Marcia and Connie's observations. And the reason why I continue to speak and nudge and advocate and cause a bit of a stir on this is because we need to look at this in a number of layers, and every layer there is an impact if we do not have a more diverse board, right? The first layer is the stats. The stats are not good. And if Hong Kong wants to maintain its international financial center status, every year, especially when International Women's Day comes around, then look at the stat, then we are nowhere where it should be when compared with international major markets, whether it's US, EU, and the UK, they are all ahead. I think we're still hovering at, I think 18%, where, UK is reaching parity, EU is in the 40%, even US is way ahead of us. And compared with our peers in Asia, people are catching up fast because either they're imposing a requirement or they see the benefit of all women on board. Now, so at the second level, which is what at the practical level, I think there is still not enough understanding that a diverse board is not about woman power, it's about getting more women. It is because it does make for good decision making, right? And because it will help the company to make sure that they've got, you know, the strongest brain power in order to help them either to rethink their strategy, given so much uncertainty this is happening around the world, or they avoid blind spots, right? Because management has not thought of this, right? And instead, I think there is still a thinking that, well, a board, because we have to have a board, because we want to do a listing, and we just sort of like, you know, tick the box. And then these days, you know, they think, oh my God, we need a woman. So, you know, can you just advise, you know, which women can you get? And it's either picking them because they are either celeb status, but not for the intellect that the individual is going to bring. You know, there are very many enlightened companies, which if you look at the slate of directors, they are very diverse, not only by gender, but ethnicity, background, age, so that you really have the best kind of discussion to help you to, you know, kind of like stress test issues brought to the board by management, make the management accountable, and make the company be more resilient and stronger, and would be able to execute the strategy and set the strategy as well. So at that level, I think if you look at the listing rules, you know, I think that, you know, asking why do you need a board? I mean, I think that piece is probably not articulated as clearly as is expected. And if you do directors training, you know, it's all about you can do this, you shall not do that, you not do that. The function of a board, I think this is a point which probably should be understood, but maybe it's not as understood as is the case. And the third is the tick the box mentality, which is related to my last point, which resulted in, you know, so if it's all tick the box mentality, I think why would women want to be involved in that exercise if it's just rubber stamping? And you know, and then I think in Hong Kong the directors' fees are not particularly generous, and so, you know, women are also free-thinking, smart individuals, and why do we want to be involved in a thing like that? So it also hampers your supply if, you know, the actual work of the board is not actually very interesting itself. So it is a bit of a conundrum, but I think the requirement to require at least one woman on the board is a tiny step forward. And let's wait and see as to, I mean, we still are 400 short before the end of this year. I know the stock exchange is actively trying to remind people that you've got to find people, but I do hope that they will find women of substance who will use this opportunity to kind of assert their influence and make some real change to the companies, and then collectively, you know, to the community, and we'll also lift our stats at the international level. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. So I'll hope that we can answer one or two more questions. So one question which I follow up on Marcia's earlier point, it's really finding your own voice, your confidence, because there really is a double standard, the way women present themselves in our speech or in our emails. We're very conscious. So in a culture where, you know, leadership equals to masculinity, or it's decisive assertiveness, in Asian cultures particularly, women are expected to be gentle, nurturing. So, the double standard we face at work, self-confidence in men are seen as bossy or arrogance in women. So any personal tips or suggestions how we should handle or behave, in work settings?
I think everybody should attempt to get, and all law firms should be giving all associates voice training, and especially more and more voice training related to using telephones or Zoom, because now that so much of what we're done is not in person. But voice training is very important, and it is particularly important for female associates because They have, many of them have been culturally trained and socially trained to speak like this, speak at really high volume. I mean, it's not going to get you respect. And I have this trouble with male associates too. It's just, you have to figure out a way so you can command the room with your voice, or command the Zoom room, or command the telephone call. And it's something that I learned from, from Jeanette Chan, from Jack Lang, from the partners that I worked with initially. And it is an essential tool for an associate. And you cannot think of it as gendered. You just have to think of it as a skill you need to have.
Thanks, Marcia. Very practical tip. Connie, please.
I don't disagree with that, but maybe to add a different perspective. I think it's knowing, being aware of what kind of what is the meeting about? Who are you meeting? And, this applies to both male and female associates. What do you wear to the meeting? I think after COVID, what I've noticed is actually there is a change in style of dress, not in a bad way, but I think it's important to realize first impressions do count. Make that first impression. Don't let the start of the meeting create that impression where you're already 10 steps back. Remember, we're in the legal business. We're not in the tech business. Of say wearing a hoodie to a meeting might be acceptable if you're in the tech business. But actually in the legal business, what you're selling to the client is trust, that you are capable, you have grit, you have resilience, you're serious about your work. So I think it's that making sure that first impressions are important. And then aside from the voice training, I think communication style, especially where, English may not be the native language, or if you need to communicate in Mandarin, like Teresa says, she got the tutor to give her tuition. And I think it's important. It's what I found quite useful over the years, you actually need to film yourself speaking and then realize what it means. And this is not difficult. A lot of you can just use your iPhone and film yourself. It's, I cringe every time I have to watch myself, but it's super helpful. Think of how you come across. Think of how, if you were the client and you watch yourself speaking, how you come across. So these are maybe two practical tips to consider.
Thank you, Connie.
So very quickly, I think there is no one size fits all, right? And everything is situation specific. So if you go to a pitch, you have to come across in a different way than if, everything is falling apart and your client is really upset and emotionally distraught and then, or you are defending a really tough situation. So, which is why this is so fun, because it's not the same every time. And so I think, but to carry yourself, everyone is different. And I would go so far as to say that as a female, there is a lot of strength in femininity, right? And I think it would be so wrong if we are just behaving like men who wear skirts, or we have to wear trousers like a man. I mean, I wouldn't buy any of that. So my advice is, you look at who you think you would like to be as potential role models. It doesn't need to be one person. It could be a combination of many people. And then you create your own style. You create your own style, and then you use visualization. So sometimes I would think, okay, I'm wearing that dress, and then I would go up and I can kind of like visualize my own head how I would appear. And be thoughtful. So you walk into a room, you stand up tall, head up, and then how you introduce yourself, it doesn't have to be the same every time, although over time you will soon develop your own style. So when you're setting out, this is a great opportunity for you to do a bit more kind of imagination And I think voice training, perhaps, and visualization, and an experiment, and see how it goes, and get feedback from your friends and colleagues.
Thank you, Teresa. So time flies when you're truly enjoying a seminar. So thank you so much to all three speakers' wisdom today. I like Teresa's point. There's a lot of strength in femininity. So I think we can end on that note. On behalf of CUHK Faculty of Law, on behalf of Dean Wolf, I take this opportunity to thank our three distinguished speakers again, Marcia, Connie, and Teresa, for sharing your wisdom and experience with all of our students and alumni. I think we need more women role models like our three speakers to show that the women are credible, competent, and a precious addition, not a liability to the board, to challenge social norms. So thank you, everyone. It's such an enlightening seminar. So thank you all. This concludes our seminar. Have a wonderful afternoon.